Imagine this. You wake up one morning and nothing is wrong, yet everything feels off. Your coffee tastes the same. The sky outside is just as blue. The mirror still returns the same familiar face. And yet, there's a subtle dissonance humming beneath the surface of your world, like a frequency you can't quite hear but can feel. You speak, and the words leave your mouth as they always have. But for the first time, you notice how they shape the reactions of others, how they carve pathways in the conversations, how they lock you into an identity you didn't fully agree to. Now pause. What if the very words you've been using your whole life are not just describing your world, but deciding it? What if language isn't just the vessel by which you communicate, but the architect of the mental prison you live in? You say, "I'm tired," and suddenly your body listens. You say, "I'm not good enough," and your confidence obeys. You call something impossible, and the gates to it vanish before you even try. Words, mere vibrations in the air, harmless? Or are they the invisible bars of your personal reality? Here's the paradox. We treat words as tools we use, yet we rarely question whether they're using us. From the moment you learned to speak, the world began feeding you a dictionary of limitations, a lexicon of labels. You were taught what things are and what they aren't, what you can be and what you must never become. And with each word you absorbed, your mind didn't just grow, it narrowed. You learned that a chair is a chair, that failure is bad, that success means this, not that. You were handed definitions like shackles and told, "This is freedom." Have you ever wondered who you'd be if no one had ever told you what a loser is? Or what beautiful means? Or what is realistic and what is delusional? Would you chase the same dreams? Would you fear the same things? Would you even recognize the voice in your own head? Think back to your childhood. Remember the first time someone told you you're being dramatic when you were simply feeling deeply. Or don't say that when you dared to speak an uncomfortable truth. Your words were policed long before your actions were. You learned early that some phrases were dangerous, others acceptable, that certain thoughts needed translation into socially permitted vocabulary before they could safely be aired, and so you adapted. You started shaping your words to match the world, not realizing the world was being shaped by the words themselves. But here's the haunting thought. If every thought you have is clothed in language, then are you thinking freely or just repeating better packaged versions of everything you've been told? Imagine a world where humans never develop speech. What would fear look like? Would shame even exist? Could failure torment you if you didn't have a word for it? Language doesn't merely describe reality, it constructs it. It creates the boundaries of what we believe is possible, permissible, and probable. And yet, we rarely question the architecture we live inside. We decorate our cages with inspirational quotes and affirmations, unaware that we're still caged by the very vocabulary we believe is setting us free. Here's the most unsettling part. You may not even be living your life. You may be living the linguistic scaffolding handed down by generations before you. Parents, teachers, lovers, strangers, the media. Each shaping your inner monologue word by word until your identity is more echo than essence. What is depression without the word depression? What is identity without nouns like success, failure, man, woman, worthy, unworthy? What if the words you use to define yourself are the very reasons you feel so confined? Could it be that the answer to your deepest dissatisfaction lies not in changing your circumstances, but in changing the language you use to interpret them. And if that's true, then the revolution you've been waiting for, the liberation you crave, is not external. It begins with silence, with noticing, with questioning every word that come out of your mouth, and more dangerously, every word that never makes it out. Because behind every phrase you speak is a belief you inherited, and behind every belief is a lens shaping your reality, limiting what you can see and what you can be. So here's the great question, the one you've felt at the edges of your awareness, but never dared to articulate. What if the only reason you believe in your own limits is because you've spoken them into existence? And if that's true, what happens when you stop? Words, those sacred syllables that build civilization, start wars, declare love, and decree identity, are also the most underestimated force shaping your inner world. And here lies the hidden tragedy. You didn't choose most of the words you live by. You inherited them. From the moment you could crawl, the world began scripting you, not with logic or reason, but with symbols, sounds wrapped in meaning, repeated until they became gospel. Good boy, naughty girl, don't talk back, be realistic. These weren't just phrases, they were seeds, planted into the wet soil of your developing mind, sprouting roots that now reach into the very structure of your self-concept. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once wrote, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." Let that settle. If your words are narrow, so too is your life. But there's something even more insidious. You rarely notice the prison walls because you mistake them for the horizon. Now ask yourself, how often do you use language without question? How often do you speak in inherited idioms, default phrases, internal monologues that were formed not by conscious thought, but by cultural osmosis? Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, the idea that beneath your personal mind lies a vast ancestral ocean of symbols and archetypes that shape your instincts, dreams, and identity. But how do those ancient forces reach you? Through language, through words like should, must, never, and always. Through the quiet voice in your head whispering, you'll never be enough. Not because you believe it, but because somewhere someone told you that, and language remembered. Nietzsche, that philosopher of fire and chaos, warned us. As soon as a man stops looking for truth and begins believing in words, he is lost. He saw language not as a window to truth, but a distortion, a net we throw over reality to catch it, only to realize we've changed it in the process. Every label you accept, failure, introvert, too sensitive, strong, becomes a filter. You begin to live through these words rather than beyond them. And these labels, though they offer the comfort of definition, also provide the cage of limitation. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that language was a function of the will, a force that strives endlessly without purpose, manifesting itself in how we express desire and suffering. In his view, the words we choose are not random. They reveal the underlying agony of existence, the drive for meaning in a world that resists it. Language becomes the mirror of our inner torment. And what happens when society itself is complicit in scripting our internal dialogue? Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, didn't envision a society enslaved by chains, but by pleasure, by distraction, by soft, palatable language that numbs the critical mind. Words like comfort, stability, and progress that sound benign, but conceal surrender, This is the tyranny of euphemism, where control hides behind pretty phrases and language becomes a velvet cage. And still deeper we fall. Jean-Paul Sartre declared that man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. Yet he also warned that language, when used without awareness, alienates us from authentic existence. You say, I have to go to work, instead of I choose to. You say, I'm stuck in this relationship, instead of I am afraid to leave. Words absolve you of responsibility. They protect you from the unbearable truth of your own freedom. This is the psychological root of the problem. Your mind, wired for survival rather than truth, craves certainty, and language offers that certainty, no matter how false it may be. You cling to phrases like, that's just how I am, and not because they're true, but because they give you a scaffolding in the face of existential chaos. Think of Viktor Frankl, imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps, who observed that the last of all human freedoms was the ability to choose one's response. He knew that the internal narrative, the words one told oneself in the darkest hour, could be the difference between life and death, between a soul that endures and a soul that collapses. So what does this mean for you? It means the voice in your head, the one narrating your days, is likely not yours. It is a collage of every teacher, parent, advertisement, book, and wound you've ever known. It is composed not of truth, but of language, and language, by its nature, is imperfect, inherited, and loaded with someone else's agenda. And yet you trust it, you listen to it, you become it. You say, I'm anxious, and it becomes identity. You say, I always mess things up, and it becomes prophecy. You say, I'm not that kind of person, and it becomes destiny. But what if that inner monologue is nothing more than a badly written script passed down from a dysfunctional theater troupe? What if you're performing lines you never auditioned for? The real problem, then, isn't your fear, your doubt, your procrastination. It's the words you use to frame them. It's the linguistic scaffolding that turns fleeting emotions into permanent identities. It's the unconscious metaphors that reduce your vast, multidimensional experience into cliches like, I'm broken, I can't, it's too late. And every time you speak them, you rehearse your limitations. So let this truth unsettle you. Your language is not just your tool, it is your lens, your jailer, and, if unchecked, your God. You do not speak freely. You speak from scripts. Scripts written by systems. Systems designed not for your liberation, but your obedience. But what if you could see the scripts? What if you could rewrite them? What would your life sound like if you spoke not from fear, but from freedom? Let's step deeper. It's time to examine what these words, these invisible whispers, have done to your life, your culture, and your future. Because the consequences of this unseen force are far more devastating than you think. You walk through the world believing you see it clearly, but you don't see the world. You see your interpretation of it. And that interpretation is filtered through the words you've been taught to use. Words are not reflections of reality. They are reductions. And every time you use them, you collapse a vast living experience into a rigid shape. The moment you call something boring, you kill its complexity. The moment you call someone evil, you cease to understand them. The moment you call yourself a failure, you write a story your future self will feel compelled to fulfill. This is the quiet violence of language. It pretends to describe when in fact it defines. You think you're free because you can speak. But what if your words are programmed? What if every phrase you utter is a code that executes a mental command beneath your awareness? I can't. It's just who I am. That's not realistic. These phrases don't just express thoughts. They create neural grooves. They hardwire assumptions into your brain, forming shortcuts that become beliefs, then habits, then identity. Cognitive scientists call this the linguistic relativity hypothesis, the idea that the language you speak influences the way you think, feel, and perceive. Not metaphorically, literally. If your native language lacks a future tense, you're more likely to save money. If it lacks words for certain emotions, you're less likely to feel them. Language doesn't merely describe thought. It creates the architecture within which thought happens. Consider this. In many indigenous languages, there is no word for ownership in the way Western cultures understand it. Land is not owned, it is belonged to. This subtle shift in syntax changes not just law, but psychology, worldview, morality. It shifts reality itself. In English, we say, I am angry. In Spanish, one says, tengo ira. I have anger. Do you see the difference? In one, you are the emotion. In the other, you possess it temporarily. One identity, one impermanence. That's not grammar. That's ontology. Now bring that home. Think of all the labels you've attached to yourself like tattoos. I'm shy. I'm anxious. I'm not creative. I'm just bad with people. Each time you repeat those words, your brain listens. It adapts. It complies. Neuroplasticity ensures it. And before long, the words become your truth. Not because they were true, but because they were spoken. The trap is not that language exists. The trap is that you believe it. Without question, without rebellion. You think you're describing your experience, but you're dictating it. You call your discomfort anxiety, and so your body behaves as if you're unwell rather than awakening. You call your sadness depression, and so your mind accepts stagnation instead of transformation. But the consequences reach even deeper into culture, politics, ethics. In war, the dead are collateral damage. In business, layoffs are streamlining. In public policy, mass surveillance is national security. These phrases don't just soften the truth, they replace it. They anesthetize the moral reflex. They make horror digestible. George Orwell called it newspeak, language designed not to clarify, but to control. If you can shrink the vocabulary of rebellion, you can shrink the thought of it too. Now look at your personal life. How many times have you surrendered to a script because of the way it was named? You stayed in a relationship because leaving was labeled quitting. You stayed in a job because discomfort was labeled normal. You denied your dreams because they were labeled impractical. And you nodded. You obeyed the labels. You swallowed the words and let them speak for you. But here's the thing. Language doesn't just control individuals. It programs entire societies. A culture obsessed with productivity cannot conceive of being without doing. A society that worships success cannot tolerate failure as a necessary step to growth. A generation taught that self-care is indulgence will suffer silently in the name of virtue. And what about love? What happens when the word love is reduced to a vague emotional high, stripped of its deeper connotation, of presence, responsibility, transcendence? What happens when commitment is confused with ownership, or loyalty becomes a stand-in for fear? Your relationships bend to the meanings you assign them. Change the word, and you change the dynamic. Language creates the theater in which your life plays out. But if the script is flawed, the performance becomes a tragedy you never intended to star in. Even silence isn't safe. Because the words you don't say, the truths you bury, the emotions you repress, the thoughts you fear, still shape you. The unspoken becomes the unconscious, and the unconscious becomes behavior. Jung warned that what you do not bring into consciousness will return as fate. But what if your fate isn't karmic? What if it's linguistic? What if the life you're living now is simply the product of what you've allowed yourself to say? This is the cost of invisible language. You think in cages, you feel in boundaries, you live in metaphors chosen for you by forces you cannot name. You become fluent in a tongue that doesn't belong to you, and it gets worse, because as long as you believe the language of the world is neutral, you will never question its influence. You will assume your thoughts are yours. You will defend ideas that were implanted in you like seeds of obedience cloaked in the illusion of free speech. So now we arrive at the crisis point, the moment just before revelation. You have seen the roots of the problem. You have seen the damage it does to your sense of self, to your culture, to your vision of reality itself. And now comes the turning point. Are you ready to rebel? Are you ready to shatter the mirror and speak in your own voice? Not the one they gave you, because only when you question the words can you begin to reclaim your world. You don't escape a prison by walking in circles. You escape by noticing the walls, by naming them, and then by refusing to speak their language. This is the rebellion, not loud at first, not explosive, but internal, quiet, terrifying, sublime. It begins when you ask a question the world taught you never to ask. Who chose these words I live by? Who told you that success looks like exhaustion and status? Who told you that love must come with suffering? Who told you that normal is good and that too much is shameful? The first act of freedom is suspicion, not cynicism, but holy doubt, the kind that burns old dictionaries and rewrites the self from ash. Jean-Paul Sartre said we are condemned to be free, that in every moment we are making choices, even when we pretend not to. To say that's just the way it is not a statement of fact. It's an act of surrender, one delivered through language and one you must now reject. So how do you break free? Not through silence, not through violence, but through relanguaging your reality. You must become both the speaker and the author, the voice and the pen. Step 1, exile the inherited voice. Do you know that voice, the one that says you're not ready? Who do you think you are? Someone like you doesn't get to choose. That voice is a ventriloquist's act, your lips, but not your soul. And the rebellion begins by separating your inner narrator from yourself. To speak internally and then ask, is this me or something I absorbed? Meditation helps, but not the type that asks you to empty your mind. No, you need to interrogate it. Watch each thought arrive. Study its syntax. Analyze its origin. You'll be shocked how much of your inner life was never yours to begin with. Step 2, invent new words. Do not wait for the dictionary to evolve. Create your own lexicon. Language is a living organism. Mutate it with purpose. Start with the labels that confine you. Replace them. Instead of failure, say redirection. Instead of weak, say sensitive and therefore aware. Instead of selfish, say self-honoring. Instead of breakdown, say initiation. Don't just adopt new words. Feel them, embody them. Let them rearrange the emotional chemistry in your bloodstream. When you rename your experience, you alter your brain's response to it. This is not metaphor, this is neuroscience. Your brain tags each word with a cluster of emotions, memories, and expectations. When you shift the tag, you shift the felt meaning of an experience. Suddenly, fear becomes fuel, loss becomes a portal, doubt becomes the signpost of something sacred trying to emerge. Step 3. Speak the unspeakable. Every culture has its taboos. Every family has its unspoken laws. Don't talk about that. Don't say that word. Don't question the story. But silence is complicity. And the moment you speak what was forbidden, you rupture the psychic agreement that kept the lie in place. Say what you've never said aloud. Write it. Whisper it if you must. Language it into the world, and the shame will begin to dissolve. This is linguistic alchemy, turning the lead of repression into the gold of liberation. Remember, trauma persists because it hides. Expression is exorcism. Step 4. Reclaim the poetic. Modern society has sterilized language. We use content instead of story, output instead of creation, optimization instead of growth. But your soul doesn't speak in corporate euphemisms. It speaks in poetry. To break free, you must return to the poetic, language that doesn't just describe life, but expands it. Say the sun doesn't just rise, it resurrects. Say your grief isn't just sadness, it's the echo of love too large for one lifetime. Say you are not fine. Say you are thunder quietly rehearsing. Why? Because metaphor expands consciousness. It breaks the frame. It awakens wonder. Aldous Huxley warned us that the modern world reduces us to functional units, but poetry makes you human again. Speak poetically, and you will live poetically. You will stop surviving and start meaning. Step 5. Learn the language of stillness. But not all words are spoken aloud. Sometimes the most radical act is to name a feeling internally before it becomes a behavior. To say in the moment, this is shame trying to protect me. This is anger masquerading as powerlessness. This is a story, not the truth. This is the language of presence, the vocabulary of mindfulness. It doesn't sound poetic, it's quiet. But it's revolutionary. Why? Because when you name a thing precisely, you take back the power it had while it remained amorphous. You become the observer, not the reactor. Step 6. Surround yourself with unscripted voices. You cannot fight the linguistic machine alone. You need others who have broken free. Voices that remind you of your real name. Read wild thinkers. Listen to people who speak strangely, brilliantly from the gut. Seek out storytellers who make you feel like your soul has been translated. Avoid those who echo empty slogans, memes, trends. Every voice you allow into your sphere becomes part of your lexicon. Curate it like your life depends on it, because it does. Step 7. Say what you mean, even when it's inconvenient. In a world of algorithms and attention spans shorter than a breath, real words are rebellion. Tell someone you love them without irony. Tell someone they hurt you without performance. Say no without apology. Say yes without defense. Honest language is holy. It purifies the space between you and the world. It forges intimacy where manipulation once stood. And then something begins to change. You stop narrating your life and start composing it. You stop calling yourself broken and begin describing yourself as mid-transformation. You begin to notice how other people are trapped in their language. And instead of judging, you listen for the prison in their words. You ask better questions. You use silence like punctuation. You create meaning instead of consuming it. and something else awakens. You realize you are no longer fluent in the language of fear. You are now speaking something older, wilder, freer, something no system can sterilize. You are becoming unspeakable, not because you can't be described, but because no one word can contain you anymore. This is the rebellion, not of weapons, but of words, not of shouts, but of sacred speech, not of destruction, but of reinvention. Your tongue is no longer a tool of the world. It is a forge. And with every sentence you choose deliberately, you shape not only your story, but the structure of your soul. And now you are ready for the final truth. The deepest realization that rewrites everything you thought you knew. The insight that will either haunt you or set you free. You have spent your life speaking to be heard, speaking to be understood, speaking to survive. But what if the voice you've spent your whole life trying to sharpen was only a single echo in a deeper silence? What if the final freedom is not speaking more powerfully, but realizing you are not the voice at all? Imagine this. You're sitting in a quiet room. No phone, no music, no other people. And for the first time, you're not distracting yourself. You're just here, present. Then it starts. The voice. It narrates, it judges, it says, "Why are you doing this? This is a waste of time. You're just being dramatic. You should get back to work." But now, you don't follow it. You don't obey. You don't even respond. You just watch it. And then the most terrifying thought of all arrives. If I can hear the voice, I am not the voice. The realization isn't poetic. It's surgical. It cuts you in half. You are not your language. You are the awareness beneath it. You are not the storm of thought. You are the silent sky it passes through. And in that instant, if you are brave, you understand something shattering. Words have shaped your world, but they are not your essence. Your essence has no name. It cannot be categorized, reduced, labeled, summarized, or commodified. It is before the I am. It is before time. It is what looked out from your child eyes before you knew the word me. Viktor Frankl, in the darkest of concentration camps, discovered a light that could not be extinguished. Not because he found new words, but because he discovered the space between stimulus and response. A space so sacred, so undisturbed by external horror, that it revealed the truth. You are not the voice reacting to the world. You are the witness choosing how to respond. And in that space, words begin to lose their tyranny. Then come tools again, not masters. Vehicles, not prisons. But it goes even deeper, because here in the stillness of being, you discover that even your story is a fiction, not a lie, not meaningless, but a lens. Your name, your past, your personality, your pain, they are garments you've worn. Some were chosen, some were forced on you, but none of them are your skin. You have confused the costume for the character, and the character for the actor, and the actor for the stage itself. You are not your biography. You are the blank page it was written on, and the page was always silent. This is the final paradox. To reclaim the power of language, you must also transcend it, not reject it, not abandon it, but see it for what it is. A spell you cast, but also a spell you can break. There is a reason mystics, saints, and sages fall into silence, not because they lack words, but because they see through them. They see how every word creates division. This versus that. You versus me, right versus wrong, self versus other, now versus later. But in silence, there is no split, only presence, wholeness, being. This is not an argument against speaking. It's a call to speak from truth, not fear, to speak only when the words rise from that deep well of stillness, to let your language serve your essence, not bury it. And when you must speak, make your words arrows of clarity, not fog. When you must be silent, let it be the kind that radiates peace, not fear. Because now you know, you are not the story. You are the silence that allows the story to unfold. So where does this leave you? With a mouth no longer enslaved by the past, with a mind no longer bent by unconscious narratives, with a heart no longer mistranslated, and most of all, with a sacred responsibility to speak as if every word you say casts a spell, to listen as if every word you hear is a doorway, to write your inner dialogue with the reverence of Scripture, because here's the final truth. Words do control your reality, but you are not your reality. You are the one who notices, and when you remember that, you become something terrifying to the world that wants to control you. You become unwritten. You no longer introduce yourself by job titles. You no longer explain your feelings in pre-approved emotional templates. You no longer reduce others to labels, ideologies, or errors in speech. Instead, you begin to live in the tension between the said and the unsayable. You speak when speaking serves truth. You fall silent when silence says more. And your words become medicine, not noise. You may find that people don't know how to respond to this. You may feel alone in your clarity, but you are not alone. You have joined the lineage of those who speak from the source, not the script. And when you do, others recognize you, not with their minds, but with their being. Something wakes up in them, not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't say, because of where you spoke from. They remember that they too are not the voice, that they too can write again, that they too are made of silence. So speak, but only when you mean it, only when the words emerge from your depths, not your programming, only when what you say builds a bridge back to being, and when you don't know what to say. Don't let the silence speak. It always did. It was you who forgot how to listen.